Hi everyone, and welcome to the 13th episode of your free online tarot course series brought to you by 1millionnights.com. Today we are looking at the symbolism and interpretations behind the Hangman card, which follows the Justice card, the one that we have examined in last week's episode. The Hangman has the number 12, so the numerological value of 3. Now, if you recall, the Empress card also contained the numerology of 3, but that had a totally different kind of expression, whereas the Hangman goes far beyond the Empress, because if the Empress is, manifested, embodied, physical, down-to-earth, human, creative energy, creativity, fertility, all of the 5 senses, Venus so to speak, well, the Hangman is her highest octave, the kind of creational energy which can only be found deep within the soul if we strip ourselves from all human qualities. This has its roots in the most divine spheres, which can only be accessed, and even very briefly, by the most enlightened souls out there. And as we are going to see in the following, the Hangman has so much to do with enlightenment and the process to reach that state of enlightenment. Now, a few words also have to be said about how the Justice card leads to the Hangman. In last week's episode, we spoke about the main symbolism of the Justice card, where it all goes down to inner balance and, that kind of divine judgment where does the heart weigh lighter than a feather? And the Fool, who is the star of the show, if you remember, all of the tarot, all of the major arcana are the Fool's journey towards becoming one with the universe, by enlightenment. So the Fool did weigh his own heart, and he found that it was barely equal to that feather. It didn't weigh that much lighter, and this realization sent him on a very profound inner journey, one similar the one he took when he embodied the hermit, inner truth, inner light, discovering your soul, the light of your consciousness, etc. Just that here, he goes into the deepest waters of his soul. He needs to discover his divinity, which means that he has to shut out everything that is telluric, that is mundane, social. He can only be with his being, within his being, and nothing else may exist in that state for him. No external stimuli, may that even be knowledge, rationality, life experience, or anything like that. Nothing can exist in this state, because that is the only way he can observe his divinity. And since the numerological interpretation of 3 has much to do with creation, the Empress, the symbol of Mother Nature, and Venus, of course, manifests basically what is inside of us, or the divine scheme already laid out, whereas the Hangman manifests from the highest divine planes into the ether. But if he needs to do this while being still in an earthly form, now that will take a lot of courage and a lot of resilience, where he has to basically overcome that state of insanity when a limited human being taps into something which is infinite, something which can send the mind into total chaos and ultimately oblivion. This is where one has to overcome pain, any kind of pain, any kind of fear, and any kind of temptation. So the hangman symbolism played out in various cultures where those very special souls who reached enlightenment or some kind of divine knowledge had to go through all of this. For example, the Buddha. The moment he decided to sit down beneath the tree and not get up until he reached enlightenment, accepting all of the temptations, tricks of his own mind, of his own being, of his own shadow. Christ or Jesus, for example, when he was tempted in the desert and in so very many different moments in his journey and even on the cross, how symbolic the tree, the cross is also very symbolic to the hangman, which hangs from a tree, and the tree represents the challenge. And also, Odin had a similar experience and journey when he had to unlock the mystery and magic, the divine knowledge of the runes. So why am I telling you this? Well, there are certain phases, moments in our lives, regardless of who we are, regardless of how spiritual and philosophical we are, we still have moments when we just have to sit under that tree, when we have to be suspended on our own crosses and overcome our own shadows, overcome our greatest limitations, fears, pain, and everything, in order to psychologically rebirth ourselves and to begin a totally new phase of our existence. That is when we basically process the heaviest, the most relevant, but also painful, hardest life lessons. And the hanged position is relevant because on one hand, it starts from within. Regardless of what triggers it, it is still a choice to overcome it and not move from that position, not shift from that state until we find some inner answers. It can be like the dark night of the soul, which is like a massive purge, but after everything that might have blocked us or everything that we had to overcome finally is done and dusted, then basically we can consider ourselves as someone totally fresh and new. And the reason I'm saying this is because, generally speaking, the hangman is not a very positive card. Many people kind of fear it. Oh no, not another hangman moment. Why am I in the wrong this time? Am I living in illusion? Am I seeing the world from a twisted, unrealistic perspective? And yes, all of these are related to the hangman symbolism, especially its most practical senses. But it is necessary because this is the only way we can overcome an illusion, by staring it in its face and alchemizing it. And that illusion can represent so very many things. Someone lied to us, or someone is being deceitful. The moment we realize that, the moment that epiphany crystallizes in our minds that we have been a victim of someone's deception, that's also a hangman moment, because we find it really hard to accept our own naivety. It's even harder when the lie and deception comes from no other than ourselves. And it's the most painful and the hardest when the deception and illusion comes from divine sources, from the spiritual realm, so to speak. Now let's see the astrology behind the hangman card. The hangman is correlated to the planet Neptune. Now Neptune is the higher octave, the most supreme and divine expression of Venus. So now we can see the correlation between the Empress and the hangman. But if Venus is love, passion, and everything earthly that makes us happy, well then Neptune is the divine spark, our highest selves. The libido, but not as Freud saw it, as our animal recreational instincts, but rather as Jung saw it. The God within us. And even in astrology, Neptune's highest expression is the source. It is infinite creational energy deep within us. It is the illusion which actually turns into reality. The most negative expression, however, is illusion which hurts us, illusion which limits us, toxic idealism, naivety, self-sacrifice, martyrdom, the Don Quixote kind of moments that all of us experience in certain stages of our lives. But regardless, Neptune is still the gateway to the divine, not just without, but mostly within. Neptune is our umbilical cord to the creator, basically, to the source. So that's why Neptune is the ruling planet of artists, of music, of dreamers, of spiritualists, mystics, of visionaries, seers, intuitives, etc. So basically, if you are a spiritual and authentic spiritual person, then you are so familiar with these hangman moments, because these are basically part of your everyday life. They come in cycles because many times we just have to upgrade our beliefs, our principles, and how we process our spiritual information and knowledge. Many times even our intuition and our inner voice has to upgrade as life progresses. The universe is in a constant flow. Nothing is ever the same. So even our inner worlds have to reflect that flow, that constant change, that movement, the succession of the cycles. Now, in more modern approaches, the hangman in reverse position has a totally different astrological governor, because modern mystics consider that the hangman reversed is ruled by Uranus, the planet of revolution, and it makes a lot of sense because once we discover the divinity within us, once we discover the truth, once we reach enlightenment, so to speak, not to be understood in its absolute sense, as in we won't become the Buddha or Christ or whatever, but basically another octave of our own enlightenment, then of course that power bursts out from us, and the power of that truth makes us a spiritual revolutionary when we can actually confront everything. That is when we get off the tree, when our meditation ends and we have to do very practical things with it. And not just, consciously, but when, our hangman state ends, as in the hangman reverse, then our higher selves, the most profound cerebral functions of our brains, our new reformatted unconscious mind is our greatest ally, and we have to express it one way or another. Uranus, the revolutionary, the rebel, the big game changer of the zodiac. They say that if the sun is our identity and how we can perceive our identity, well, then Uranus is our divine identity, what the divine created us for, and what our true purpose in the universe is, so way outside the human sphere. And even though not a lot of tarot readers agree upon this, it is still very useful, because when the hangman is in upright position, well, it does symbolize the Neptune, that everything is still, nothing is gonna happen in your life until you contemplate, until you finish that inner journey. So don't expect any sudden twists and turns of events or miracles or whatever. But when the hangman is in reverse position, then it is exactly the opposite, when things change in a sudden because something inside of you changed already. That is the moment of great epiphany, sudden realizations, instant connections, synchronicities, when you rebel against the state of passivity or procrastination or stagnation or whatever. Even sometimes you even rebel against the divine. It can represent when you change your own destiny, because it is absolutely possible. If we look at Uranus in practical astrology, so to speak, many times it is the planet which symbolizes earthquakes, tsunamis, unusually destructive weather phenomenon, cataclysm, and basically what is a natural calamity when even that which is so very stable and unsusceptible to change normally still changes because of that big magnetic or whatever chaos that triggers it. Now let's get to the more practical part. How do we interpret the Hangman? Well, from a strictly spiritual perspective, it is very straightforward, everything that I said until this moment. And for example, when it's combined with different cards, it can show what exactly is happening within you. What are you confronting internally? For example, Hangman and the Devil, your conditioning, maybe the influence of other people in your life. Where do you feel enslaved spiritually speaking? Maybe it's a dogma, maybe it is a spiritual approach, maybe it is someone else's philosophy, someone else's spiritual methodology. The Hangman and the Tower, you are confronting your fear of sudden changes and disasters, for example. The universe might send you into a deep state of stagnation where absolutely nothing happens and moves in your life until you reach the point of desperation where you invite change in any way, shape or form, even if it's a disaster, just things to change. Now that is one way to overcome certain fears, by having the opposite in great excess until it almost drives you mad. Hangman with the Empress, for example, it can be, like your hedonistic tendencies or the pleasures of the body. Hangman with the Emperor card, it can be, you might have a your way or the highway attitude towards certain things, and that needs to be shifted. Hangman and the Wheel of Fortune, for example, your attitude towards fortune, luck, hazard, and gratitude. Hangman and, for example, the Judgment card, your relations with the divine judgment. Maybe you fear the divine, as in, like in biblical terms. You are afraid of doing things wrong not to upset the universe, and maybe that fear is deeply rooted in your unconscious mind, and the universe just wants to show you that it doesn't actually judge the way we human beings think that it would, but rather it is always we who judge ourselves, and we create our own judgment. Hangman with the World card, divine timing. Sometimes things are not under our control, especially when they are timed. So it may be teaching you a lesson of patience, where you know that something is meant to happen, you know it with 1,000,000% certitude, yet still the universe delays it until you learn to be patient. Now, from a non-spiritual perspective, the Hangman can represent very different things. First of all, it can represent mental and emotional imbalance. For example, the Hangman and the Nine of Swords. Now that is a deep depression where maybe the help of a counselor or psychologist or therapist is needed to shift out of it. Hangman and Five of Swords, Seven of Swords. Maybe there is someone in your life, someone in your social circle, maybe circle of friends, a colleague or someone who is really, really intoxicating you with something, programming something which is not in your highest good inside of you, in your mind, and that is basically ruining your life, and you need to become aware of it and detach yourself. Or hangman reversed with all of these, well then it is you who are rebelling against the world or society or a group of people, but because you are the minority, you cannot demand others to change in your favor, but you either have to detach yourself and accept that this is the way things are, or you have to change your attitude. Or, for example, the hangman with the hermit, you feel very, very lonely, abandoned, alone, etc. Hangman with the Three of Cups, you may be surrounded by so very many people who are actually good intended and positive and all of that, but you still feel lonely because maybe you don't understand yourself. You need a genuine connection with yourself in order to appreciate the connection with others. Hangman with the Ten of Cups, for example, a really profound emotional purge where you're removing a trauma, a bad memory, etc. Hangman with the Six of Cups, a deep moment of nostalgia when you're not even living in the real world, but you're living in your own bubble, a fantasy or memories or etc. And there's nothing really that you need to do. It is just a moment that all of us have. Or it can mean when there is no external pleasure in your life, your memories can offer you all the pleasure you ever need. Hangman and Eight of Cups, escapism. If you are facing a difficult moment in your life, escape. There are games, there are books, movies, fantasy, etc. And of course, if it is not in excess, it is a really, really good coping mechanism. Hangman with the Ace of Wands reversed, Two of Wands reversed, Three of Wands reversed. Nothing can change in your life unless you have the initiative, until you take attitude, unless you express your will. Or Hangman with the Ace of Swords, for example. Hangman with the Two of Swords. Nothing can change in your life unless you start communicating, unless you make a decision, you make a choice, you express a preference. Hangman with the Six of Swords. Nothing can change in your life unless you study, unless you understand the problem either rationally or scientifically, as in go do a course or study or finish studies or anything which has to do with rationalizing stuff. Hangman with Ten of Swords. Well, this is where you really, really need to surrender, because the Ten of Swords is the card of defeat. It has ended, it is not going to come to fruition. So maybe the hangman has to process that defeat and turn it into, alchemize it into something not so negative, not allow it to become a trauma, into a life lesson, for example. Or the hangman with the Ten of Swords reversed, well, it's not really a defeat. Either look at it from a different perspective, or wait until more happens, because it may turn into a success in the most unexpected and surprising ways. Hangman and the Six of Coins, for example, generosity and goodwill may surround you, but you just don't know how to accept it. Hangman and Five of Coins or Ace of Coins reversed. Now this may speak about an illness, for example, hormonal problems, for example, a chemical imbalance in your body, where unhappiness or a bad psychological moment in your life, suffering or whatever it may cause, it may lead to actual physical illness. Or at times it can mean poverty, scarcity, losing a lot of money, having to sacrifice something for others. Or it can also mean martyrdom and a self-sacrificial attitude, one which we may not overcome because it may be karmic in nature. It may be something that has to do with our life stories, so we have to go with the flow. Hangman and Nine of Wands or Ten of Wands, for example, that may represent that you are victimizing yourself even without knowing it. Because, when you victimize yourself, you get a lot of attention. And you may not realize this, you may not rationalize this, but your unconscious mind does. It knows what it's doing. Sometimes when there is not enough attention in your life, this is what our beings do. Hangman and the moon. This is a very dreamy and magical combination. Pay attention to your intuition, to your dreams, whatever you are subtly experiencing, because that might hold answers for you. Or Hangman and the Nine of Cups, for example. You already are happy, and why shift away from this feeling of happiness and completion? This is when something inside of you might tell you to feel guilty because you're happy, because you're okay, because you don't have any problems that other people have. So before that, inner demon can ruin this state of happiness for you, shut it out and just stay in your happiness. So in conclusion, even though the Hangman is seen as a rather negative card, it really isn't. Because not only do these states or these karmic moments teach us that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that there is a greater divine purpose in everything, but they also show us that when we overcome these moments, when we overcome our own limitations, the temptations, the inner devil, so to speak, we take a huge leap, a quantum leap, towards our own enlightenment. And when we do that, our lives change in very significant ways, because what is within has to be ultimately on the outside as well. Well, I do hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for listening, and see you in the next episode. Until then, bye for now.